We're counting down the best albums of the decade, and this is 2017. Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I am Belgian Jasper. If this is your first time on the channel, click subscribe right now. So in this series, we're now at 2017, which was a terrible year. Seriously, look it up. I always start these videos with a quick overview of world news, and because there's already so much bad news out there and we all need some positivity, I'm only gonna focus on good news. In January, there was the Women's March. Worldwide, this was the largest protest in history. In March, a 4-year-old girl crashed an on-air interview with Professor Robert Kelly, who is now known as BBC Dad. In July, Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman broke all the box office records. In August, there was a massive breakthrough in science, and for the first time, we were able to observe the collision of 2 neutron stars. And in November, a new species of orangutan was discovered in Indonesia. Although I want to focus on the positive, I do need to call out that in 2017, we had to say goodbye to a couple of rock and metal icons. We lost Malcolm Young from AC/DC, Chester Bennington took his own life, as did Chris Cornell, and we also lost maybe the godfather of all rock music, Chuck Berry. But let's go back to the positive. 2017 was a phenomenal year for heavy metal. As usual, I will give you my top 5 albums of the year, but I always give some runners up, and I tried really hard to narrow it down, but I couldn't cut a list of 10. So in alphabetical order, we had Will to Power by Arch Enemy. There was No Grave But the Sea by Alestorm, Mass 6 by Amenra. Belgian speed thrashers Evil Invaders released Feed Me Violence. Mastodon released The Emperor of Sand. Myrkur released Mareridt. Nidingr released The High Heat That Licks the Heaven. That's a mouthful. OverKill released The Grinding Wheel. Solstafir released Berdreyminn. And finally, Trivium released The Sin and the Sentence. All of these albums were phenomenal, groundbreaking, or just hilarious, but they didn't make my top 5. Alright, so let's get this started. My top 5 albums for 2017. At the number 5, we've got The Doomsday Kingdom by The Doomsday Kingdom.
Where is the sun? Where is the light in your eyes? Why were you born?
So this was the debut album by a project band, Future Will Tell, founded by Candlemass mastermind Leif Edling. You might also remember him as the brains behind Avatarium. Candlemass meets Dio era Black Sabbath with some early 70s Judas Priest mixed in. It's a really cool heavy metal album. There's some great songs on this album like Silent Kingdom. The star of this album really is Marcus Yidal, who's the guitar player. My favorite song on the album is Hand of Hell.
And I go where you go, 'cause I'm guided by the hand of hell.
Alright, at the number 4 spot, we have the glorious return to the Arion storyline by Arjen Lucassen's Arion with his album The Source. Everybody Dies was definitely a hit of the album, but this album is just a phenomenal story as we expect from Arjen. This album is a prequel to his 01011001 album, which still stands maybe as my favorite Arion album, but The Source is really cool too. And what do you expect with phenomenal singers on this album? Just think about it. You've got Tommy Karavik from Camelot, you've got Simone Simons from Epica, Floor Jansen from Nightwish, you've got Tobias Sammet from Edguy and Avantasia, you've got Russell Allen from Symphony X, and as a breakout character, you've got Mike Mills, at the time relatively unknown singer from an Australian project called Toehider. He plays the role of TH1, which is the robot, and especially on The Day the World Breaks Down, his performance stands out. At the number 3 spot, we've got one of the best thrash albums of the new century, And that is saying a lot because there has been a long list of phenomenal thrash albums since the revival in the early 2000s. I am talking about Nightmare Logic by Power Trip. The first thing that comes to mind when listening to Power Trip is, how does this sound so good? And it's that mix of an old school sound with a modern approach, and it just works so well. And everybody in the metal world all of a sudden just fell in love with this band. This is a really, really good thrash metal album. Now, unfortunately, as I'm sure most of you know, this is also the last Power Trip album because singer Riley Gale passed away in August of 2020. When you look at the songs on this album, there's really no weak song, and in a less amazing year for metal, this album could have been the best album of the year. There are some straightforward thrash anthems like Firing Squad. One of the standout songs is definitely If Not Us Then Who, but the ultimate song of this album, and you know, the song that Power Trip will always be remembered for, is Executioner's Tax, Swing of the Axe.
Go on and look at you. Today's your lucky day. The execution is here, and it's ready to make you pay.
As amazing as Nightmare Logic is, for me, there's two albums that were even better in 2017. First up, on the number 2 spot, we've got the Canadian power metal, neoclassical, melodic death, heavy metal band called Unleash the Archers with the album Apex. Cleanse the Bloodlines was definitely one of the standout tracks on Apex, but again, an album really without any bad song on it. Apex, without a doubt, was the album that lifted this band up from the power, heavy, whatever, metal underground, and all of a sudden this band starts to knock on the door of the heavy metal elite. You know, a jump that band may have made this year when they released Abyss. Apex is another concept album. I'm not going to go into the story, just know that it revolves around the story of the Immortal. Hashtag Sasquatch is the Immortal. A very powerful being, and his powers are showcased in the phenomenal song 10,000 Against 1.
10,000 against 1. They will rise.
This band, all of them are on a technical level really good. Every member is the secret weapon of the band. Now, while I say that, this band is definitely recognized now as the band where Britney Slays sings in. Britney kind of stands out as giving this total badass power metal voice, and that is perfectly showcased on the most famous song of this album called Awakening. Okay, I've already mentioned 14 really good albums of 2017, so what album was even better than all of that? Well, what is really cool is that this album is album number 14 of this band. I'm talking about maybe the best album ever by Creator, Gods of Violence.
Satan is real. Satan is real. Horrible tyranny, human catastrophe. Satan is real.
So Creator is a German band, and this album actually debuted on the #1 spot in the German charts. Germany is a country that loves metal, but for a thrash metal album, that's pretty cool. You know, one of the big singles of this album was Satan is Real, which is a cool song, but it's a little cheesy, let's be honest. But no worries, Creator takes away all that cheese and just goes pedal to the metal in songs like Totalitarian Terror. One thing that Creator has always done well is stay in touch with their fans, even in their rocky 90s era, and on this album that is no different, with an anthem they made for their fans, which is called Hail to the Hordes.
Stronger than hate, stronger than fear, stronger than law. We are one. Hail to the hordes. We are one. Hail to the hordes.
Again, Gods of Violence is one of those albums that every song is really good, but if there is one song for me that stands out as the best song on this album and one of the best songs Creator has ever released, it has to be Lion with Eagle Wings. Well, there you have it. Those were my picks for the best albums of 2017. This was a great year for heavy metal, so I'm sure that you've got some great ideas about albums that should have made my list but didn't. If you do, put those in the comments. Let me know why I should have picked another album than the ones that I picked. Next up, we'll talk about 2018. Stay tuned and stay heavy. You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it and subscribe to the channel.